The art of the pattern interrupt. Hey, Mark Benefield here from the Benefield Group at Real Broker, and thank you so much for stopping by today to learn how to make an effective sales call. Some are going to call them cold calls, some are going to call them warm calls, whatever it might be. Thanks for stopping by. You're probably here because your mentor or your broker or your coach has been encouraging you to make calls. So you probably got yourself some data, maybe a list of expireds or for sale by owners. Maybe you bought a neighborhood list of cell phone numbers to call and blanket a neighborhood, or maybe you're calling around a listing or even inviting people to an open house, or maybe you're new in the business and you're just now making your list of sphere of influence. Maybe you have a list of 100 people that you know, and now you're wanting to call them. But now here you are, you've got your list, and you're sitting there staring at your phone, and the phone is probably literally staring you straight back, and you're saying to yourself, what do I do? I don't know what to say. Somebody please help me. So before you found my video, you probably typed in cold call scripts, real estate, and YouTube, and you probably came across one of those 25-year-old scripts, put out there by somebody who, quite frankly, hasn't sold a home in the last 3 decades, or better yet, maybe you're trying to implement a technique of somebody you heard in your office, somebody who's one of those high-flying producers. They're natural to sales. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones that have zero problem making cold calls and believe if you just put a picture of your kids or the boat you want to buy someday up on the wall, then everything's going to be okay, and things will just work out for you. Well, in this series of videos, I am going to break down the art of making calls, cold calls, warm calls, hot calls, or otherwise. And I'm not going to just make stuff up. I'm going to rely on sound psychology drawn primarily from transactional analysis. Let's face it, there's an art to making a call. And if you know how to use the brushes correctly, you can paint a simply gorgeous picture. First of all, let's get this out of the way. If you're one of those high alpha, super high D on a disc scale, agents who has no problem making calls, then go ahead and click out of this video right now, because quite frankly, you don't need it. And you'll probably think that what I'm going to say would never work, because you don't have to use pattern interrupts, because you're just so bulletproof. You just call and call and call and call and call, and you win based on volume, not necessarily on skill. You think what I'm going to say won't work, but you'd be 100% wrong, because I'm not going to waste my time trying to convince you otherwise. On the other hand, if you're not a super alpha, super high D, and you struggle to make calls, then you're in the right place. But I want you to buckle up your seatbelt, because the ride might just get a little bit bumpy before we're done. Step number one is what I call the pattern interrupt. Casey Neistat wrote, if you're doing what everyone else is doing, you're doing it wrong. And the sales guru and mentor David Sandler said, if everybody else is doing something, you need to stop doing it and do something else fast. Most of the complaints I get, or what I call excuses, if you will, simply state, and they say to me, Mark, you don't understand my market. There's so many agents calling these leads. I'm just wasting my time, and I'm just saying the same thing as them anyway. Well, first of all, there's probably far less agents that are calling these leads than what you think there are. In my experience, from having worked with agents and ISAs over the last dozen years. And you are correct, however, that everybody is, in fact, basically saying the same thing or close to it. But here's what you don't know about the third point, and here's where your opportunity is. Most of those other agents that are calling suck at it. And they're just as afraid to make these calls as you are. So how are you going to convince a prospect that you're different when everything that comes out of your mouth is exactly the same as everyone else? You're not going to differentiate yourself. Remember that 25-year-old script I mentioned earlier? Everybody's using that same script or something like it, Go ahead and use that old tired script if you want to. I mean, be argumentative with the prospect. Try to emulate those super high alpha, high D, agents if you want to. But don't get mad at me when you're eating dial tone, after 3 or 5 seconds, day in and day out, week in and week out, and want to quit after the first day. I'm going to teach you a simple pattern interrupt that's allowed me to close hundreds of millions of dollars worth of deals, both in and out of real estate. And yet it's so simple that most of you won't even try it because you think it won't work. Yet I use it effectively every single day in real estate, and I've taught it to thousands of people. Number one, stop asking people how they are. A, you don't really care because what you're trying to do is find somebody who needs to sell a house. And B, they're probably not going to be truthful with you anyway. I mean, yes, I know there's some people from the South. They're going to have an issue with this because they're just super overly polite. But the reality is, that's what salespeople do. They say, "May I speak with Mr. Williams? How are you today?" It's a beacon, it's a bat signal that says, "I'm a salesperson." And if you don't want to get treated like salespeople, get hung up on and yelled at, et cetera, then stop doing the things that salespeople do. Number two, stop asking if now is a good time for the call. I mean, let's face it. Has there ever been a good time for a cold call? When's the last time you got a cold call and was happy about it, right? Stop asking. It's a waste of time. We don't have time to burn right here. We need to get through this quickly and to the point. Point number three, stop telling people the name of your brokerage, your team, or whatever in the first 5 seconds. A, nobody cares. B, you're chewing up valuable time that we could be utilizing to our benefit. Start doing this instead. And yes, it will work. This is not the entire call, just the beginning 10 seconds or so. And the goal is to get you past that initial brush off, get you past that initial negativity, and get you permission and get the prospect to want to hear what you have to say. If you want to set yourself apart from everybody else from the very beginning, listen up, because here it goes. Bill, yes, I always use the prospect's first name. If it's Mary, I'm going to say Mary. If it's Quan Juan, I'm going to say Quan Juan. If it's Jethro, I'm going to say Jethro. I'm going to use their first name if I feel like I can pronounce it correctly. Right? I'm always going to do that. Bill, Mark Benefield here. I don't suppose my name is familiar to you, is it? That's it. That's the opening. Bill, Mark Benefield. I don't believe my name is probably familiar to you, is it? And the prospect's always going to say something like, "No, it isn't," or "Nope," or "I don't think so." And then you're going to say something super fancy like, "Well, I didn't think it would be. In fact, I'm not even sure that you were the right person. Maybe you can help me." I didn't think it would be. In fact, I don't even know if you're the right person. Maybe you can help me. That's it. That's the entire pattern interrupt. It's so simplistic and so simple, yet it is chock full of psychological principles taken from transactional analysis, and it works. And don't tell me it won't work until you try it. The entire pattern interrupt is to get the other person to do something different than their normal pattern. That is the essence of a pattern interrupt, to get people to do something different than what they normally do, which for a sales call is usually either hung up on you, yell at you, or simply be a jerk. Because, quite frankly, that is how salespeople are treated. And don't tell me otherwise, because I've been a salesperson for 25 years. Because you do the same thing to half the sales calls that you get, why wouldn't they do the same thing to you? It's just a understood part of of our culture that you can be mean and nasty to salespeople and get away with it, and nobody's going to make you feel bad for it. If their normal pattern is to be defensive and hang up or get mad, you just destroyed the pattern by being completely different. Underlying this entire call, however, is solid psychology. By stating who you are at the very beginning and allowing the prospect to basically understand that you are searching for help, you're going to disarm their what we call their inner critical parent. And this comes directly from transactional analysis. It gets very, very deep, which we won't go into today. Let's just say we need to disarm their inner critical parent, which then gives them permission that they need to allow you to get to their emotional ego states. You understand that that's what people do when you call and you get them, they go defensive. What they're doing is pulling back because their job is to protect them from the evil salesperson, from the person who's trying to sell them stuff, take their money, take advantage of them. So they're going into what we call critical parent mode to protect the emotional part of their ego state, the ones that make decisions and buy things. By asking for help, you are now appealing to what we call their nurturing parent ego state, because it's a natural human response to want to help you. I told you I didn't just make this stuff up, okay? This prospect's nurturing parent ego state wants to know why you called. Quite frankly, they are ready to listen to you at this point. Interrupt the pattern. Stop sounding like everyone else and work to differentiate yourself from all of the others from the very, very first moment. It won't matter how many others have tried to call them. When you are signaling signaling yourself out at the very beginning by being different than the rest, this is a whole lot more. There is a whole lot more to being successful in making calls. But if you're willing to try this small pattern interrupt, then you will already be further in your calls than ever before. And I know you're also going to be more successful.